Okay. Good afternoon, students and staff of Murdoch University. My name is William Fowler, and I'm the current president of MUEnSA, the Murdoch University Environmental Science Association. We are a student association based around environmental study at Murdoch University, and I encourage anyone interested in the environment to get involved. Firstly, I would like to duly acknowledge the traditional owners, both past and present, of the land in which we meet today, the Noongar people. It has been an exciting few weeks since some of the MUEnSA Committee approached Bob Brown at a talk he did as part of a farewell tour. We simply put to him, "We run a student association, would you like to come do a talk?" Without hesitation, Bob said yes, which I think says a lot about Bob and the man he is. He's taken time out of his busy schedule today, so we'd like you to show your appreciation by donating to the Bob Brown Foundation. We have some tins at the door, and when we leave, there'll be some in the courtyard with refreshments. And all proceeds will go to the foundation. Today's proceedings will include a short introduction from John Bailey, who is the Dean of Environmental Science. Bob Brown will then give his talk. Then there'll be time for a few questions after Bob's talk, but please try and keep them succinct, as we'd like to give as many people the opportunity to ask a question as possible. And also Bob has to leave a little bit earlier today because he has a Q&A he has to be on Q&A tonight. So, not Q&A? The project. On the project. Refreshments will be provided after the event down the stairs in ECL Courtyard. We also ask you to turn off your mobile phones. And I'd now like to welcome John Bailey to the mic to do a brief introduction.
You've all come here to listen to Bob, not me, and I have plenty of opportunities to speak with and at and to you on other occasions, so I'll only take a couple of minutes. And really all I want to say is the first time that Bev and I met Bob was in 1982 or 1983, when we were 2/4 of the WA node of the Tasmanian Wilderness Society as it then was. And Bob had come to the west to inspire the small WA contingent, and we were all housed in the Environment Centre in a derelict upper storey building in Wellington Street, and we're waiting for Bob to turn up. Little known to us, he had already turned up, wandered up the stairs and sat down and was just waiting for something to happen. So that says a lot about Bob. He's a very humble person, not at all egotistical, probably one of the very few politicians who has that strange mix of character and career. And I think Bob, probably the other characteristic that most marks you out in my mind is a man of great integrity. So on behalf of the students and the staff and the Vice-Chancellor, and especially MUEnSA and Will, welcome. May I invite you to give your talk.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Will, and thank you all. I'm here to get inspired because I have found that as I got older, the thing that really fires my boilers is running into younger folk of the same age as John when we met up in 1980 something. Because the world will succeed or fail on optimism. I'll come back to that in a moment. But firstly, I wanted to say I've just had my cap on as mission leader for Sea Shepherd up in the Kimberley. And in case you think the Bob Brown Foundation is a establishment to help me in my old age, its aim is to help impecunious greenies who are not otherwise able to get through. And one of the first people I'd like to acknowledge, because I've been able to get to see her since I got out of the Senate, I'm a bird out of the cage, is Miranda Gibson. Now Miranda right now is 60 metres up a tree in almost the geographical centre of Tasmania. She's up on a ridgetop, and they had a road in clear-felling forest almost to the base of her tree when she took to it 7.5 months ago. To give you an idea of 60 metres up a tree, it's something like 22 stories high. And when finally I, with partner Paul, he baked a cake, went out to see Miranda a fortnight ago. I'd been in contact with her quite a lot in the meantime. We got hauled up with a harness round the backside and a long rope and somebody on the other end of a pulley. The experience was uplifting, inspiring, breathtaking and downright terrifying. And nevertheless, after I recovered and Paul got hauled up, we had a cup of tea with Miranda. She hasn't come down for 7.5 months. She gets the usual questions from media people and opponents, of course, who ring up. She's got a solar-powered computer up there. Aren't you on the dole? You know, the sort of things you ask a person who's devoted her life to a grand vision of protecting magnificent forests and their wildlife. Are you on the dole? Well, no, she's not. She's a high school teacher. But she's getting along herself on a very low cost up on that platform. What do you do with your wastes? Well, the same as everybody else. Disposes of them thoughtfully. She's got people who come out and one pulley comes down and the other goes up with food and the other comes back with waste. And it's you know, it's part of being in such an exposed position that that's something that makes people wonder. But in that woman's heart is the saving of planet Earth. She rang me 8 months ago and said, Bob, can I talk with you? I've got a plan in mind. And when I heard what it was, I said, Miranda, you go for it. She's centred, she's sensible, she's intelligent, she knows what's happening, and she's decided to commit herself to the planet. 7 billion people might not have decided to do that, but she has. And you can find her on observertree.org, observer tree.org. If you'd like to send Miranda a cheerio, she's had a huge snowfall dump on her and her tree in the last 2 days. And she's in one of the giant Eucalyptus regnans, the tallest trees ever to grow on the face of the planet. The biggest measured one was 134 metres high. That means a soccer field or hockey field in length, and then add another third and put it up that way in Victoria before they flattened that in 1880-something to turn it into dairy farm. The trees in Tasmania are scraping at 100 metres, and we think in some of that forest there's much higher. The tallest tree on Earth at the moment is 115, measured, is 115 metres redwood in California. But these trees in big storms, they rock like this and spin like that. They're a magnificent piece of natural engineering. How they pump water up 100 metres still defies the physicists. But Miranda is defying the might of Forestry Tasmania, the big wood chip corporations. By the way, Forestry Tasmania at the moment is a magnificent outset. It's managed an outcome which most of us just couldn't emulate. It takes a product which costs nothing. That's the trees. It's been given those. And it sells them. And it's losing $4 million a month. While they're closing schools and are wanting to close them and can't maintain hospital wards in Tasmania, where there's a Labor government and a Liberal opposition, both of whom support this operation to the hilt. And what are they doing with the wood? Well, 90% goes to export wood chipping. That means to make paper for a throwaway rest of the world at lower and lower and lower prices, because this wood can't compete with mass plantations of Tasmanian blue gums. There's plantations the size of Tasmania in South America alone, but they're in Vietnam and South Africa and elsewhere. Higher quality, much more easily gotten to port, mechanically cut and so on. And the forests, the ancient forest ones have had fires through there. They're blemished. These big trees like Miranda's in cost quite a lot to cut down. Forestry Tasmania's found a new answer for that Mr. Nobel would be pleased with. They dynamite trees these days because it saves jobs, it's quicker, and down comes these giants, hundreds of years old, with the nesting sites for the possums and the birds, the great owls, the bats. All bats in Tasmania, all 9 species, live in trees, not in caves or elsewhere. And the insect realm that's there. And this is being ripped down. We're paying for it in Tasmania to be exported. And the latest player on the field is Tar An, which is a giant Malaysian corporation which has just about run out of forests in Sarawak, where the Penan and Kenyan people have had their universe torn down by 5 or 6 mega Malaysian conglomerates, including Tar An, which is now invested in Tasmania. And why wouldn't you? It's wanting peeler logs to make into ply elsewhere in the world. And why wouldn't you? Because the Tasmanian Labor government of Paul Lennon got Forestry Tasmania to spend $23 million to build the premises for Tar An to come in and to function in its peeler operation. On and on it goes. But the point here is, very often ecological destruction goes hand in hand with economic absurdity. I'm a Green because I got into politics out of environmentalism because it's very clear an alternative is required for the planet, and the big parties don't provide it and cannot. So I said to Petra Kelly, the great German Green, and I had a discussion in 1984 when she was in Tasmania, and she'd worked on Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign before he was assassinated in America, and she'd worked with the Social Democrats, the Labor equivalent in Germany, and she said these parties put on their green spots in opposition and shed them in government, and they're not able to get to do something else because the system we have in a world of runaway materialist religious fervour is one that doesn't allow them to find an alternative. They'll do this and that, which is, they'll talk about sustainability and environmentalism, but they cannot constitutionally get away from the pressure of the big end of town and those lobbying houses. When I was in Canberra, you know, the Australian Mining Industry Council is across the road in a glass house. There's no Defend the Kimberley Coast group across the road in a glass house. There's no Let's Look After the Wetlands around Perth group across the road in a glass house. And these companies are mega rich and they get massive taxation breaks which help fund such things. If you set up a glass house to lobby politicians, it's tax deductible. The public pays a big percentage of the cost of that for you. So once you get going on that train, it's a pretty good thing to have. And I, with others, thought there's got to be a difference to this. And the Greens will be replaced if we don't fulfil our mandate from the earth to ensure that this place is here 50, 500, 50,000 years from now for not just we human beings to enjoy, but for our fellow creatures on this planet. And the Greens' 4 pillars of peace: we can't, in a nuclear age, settle disputes through violence. It's democracy or guns. Take your pick. I'm for democracy. Democracy, social justice. And wouldn't the world tomorrow, if a referendum were held, vote overwhelmingly in favour of reducing armament spending, which this year is $1 trillion US or Australian dollars, by 10%, so that 100 billion, more than enough to provide every child on the planet with food for their belly, clean water, and a school to go to, so that she or he can find what it is in themselves that's going to give them fulfilment and contribute to society in the years to come. Be a massive vote for that, but it's not going to happen, because governments everywhere else are under the same impact of the big parties in this country. And they say you've got to be economically not just literate, but you've got to drive the economy. And I was at the Bellingen Energy Festival on the east coast of Australia last week, and there's Dick Smith, entrepreneur extraordinaire, saying he's come at this end of his life to understand a fundamental truth, that you cannot in a finite system have growth of the use of that system. It will end up imploding. You must have a sustainable, and I mean sustainable as the dictionary means it, relationship between people and the planet. And you know, you've seen the figures the same as I have. Currently we're using 120% of the world's living resources. 7 billion of us. 2.5 billion when I came onto the planet, 7 billion now. And 10 billion, a 30% increase by the end of this century. But if you've read Paul Gilding's book, The Great Disruption, you'll realise that that isn't the biggest threat. There's a 10 times bigger threat, because projections for the rest of the world catching up with us and us continuing to growth in consuming the planet as we are at the moment means a 300% growth in consumption. Now, we're already more than using the replenishment of the living ecosystem. There's of course all sorts of other wealth, but this planet can't provide that. And we have a choice as to whether we use our God-given intelligence to rein ourselves in, or whether we simply carry this through to what Gilding calls the Great Disruption, in which people for 300-400 years have been saying, you project forward and the planet cannot withstand us. Now, 65 million years ago, a big rock, so to speak, came from outer space and smashed into the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and set up a nuclear winter. I'm told that if such a rock were to hit us now, the temperature on this side of the planet would reach 700 degrees centigrade within a couple of days. You can see why the dinosaurs, not only a couple of species of them, but they went comprehensively to extinction, and some little third rodent-like thing managed to get deep enough into the ground to survive it and come out and produce the age of mammals. And here we are, the biggest herd of mammals on the planet. It's interesting, that one, because we depend on the biosphere and we are an animal, and we've forgotten that. David Suzuki's story about going to the supermarket in Vancouver and seeing a sign up outside which said animals not allowed in this shop. So he got in the car and drove to where he could shop. Reminds us of who we are. But there is a difference. That is, we have this intelligence, ability to reflect on who we are and to change our biosphere. Now, I got into awful trouble with the Murdoch press for saying a few things that I'll repeat now. So, according to the Murdoch press, what you're about to hear is loopy, wacko, dangerous, I've forgotten what else, but anyway, be careful. It's been postulated by scientists that there may be a reason why we're not being contacted by life forms on other planets. These days we know that there is hundreds of billions of planets in the universe with us, and billions of those at least are suitable for life, and they're far enough away from a source of heat like our sun, and in the right orbit as we just happen to fit between Venus and Mars to produce life. The big question is, after 13.7 billion years since the Big Bang, why hasn't there been a more advanced life form and more evolved intelligence than our own? And if, just on ordinary, those statistics, you'd expect there would be. Surely we're not the first and most advanced life form to get to this intelligent, reflective stage. Why aren't they in contact with us? Well, Hawking, amongst others, says maybe the case is that every time they got to where we are and could manipulate their environment, they couldn't overcome their instinctive urge to consume, and they did it in. And now it's our turn. They went to extinction at their own hand, not some rock from outer space, but through their own hand. And maybe we're now challenged with the same position. Well, if so, I don't know. We're challenged to be defiant of the great disruption. We're challenged to be intelligent about it. And basic to that is optimism. I've seen the full spectrum of humanity in my time. You will have too. I've never seen a person who didn't reflect something that I felt integral to myself. And we have a corporate intelligence and society that's much bigger than the individual. And when I pop off very shortly from this brief period of awareness on the planet, the corporate intelligence keeps going, and it's all in there. And we can contribute a bit or we can take away from it. It's a pretty marvellous system. Without it, of course, we wouldn't have evolution. We wouldn't be all sitting here talking with each other as we are now. But optimism and pessimism. Optimism is a motivator. Pessimism is a factor for being knocked out. We've got a right-left thing in this world. The right knows it's right. The left is left to think about it. I know that, for example, when I stood up and said to George Bush when he was visiting our Parliament, "Hey George," well, I said, "Mr. President, you know, I'm a respectful person. How about you release our 2 Australians from Guantanamo Bay as you've released the Americans to be tried in a domestic court? And with the Iraq war raging, how about you observe international law? Because if you do, you'll be respected by the world." Well, pandemonium, you know. People are going to punch my head in and do terrible things. One Adelaide radio person had a beat-up group ready to take me out the back, etc. But you know, George Bush knew he was right. He's going to run them down and smoke them out. And he had no worry with that. Anyway, after that engagement, my staff said, "Hey Bob, the phones are in meltdown." And they were. And they were all from that side spectrum. They were going to kill, they were sent nooses, we got bullet cases, we got bits of white powder, we got, how could you be such a disgusting, unprincipled person to speak to the President of the United States, who was the only person in the Parliament at that time not elected by Australians. It took some weeks before we got calls coming in from people saying, "I'm really glad you did that. I'm proud that Australia had somebody," and Kerry Nettle, my fellow senator at the time, who was mentioned the issue of Iraq and Guantanamo Bay. It said, and then that built up and built up and built up. It's an interesting difference. And here is where the maker of the universe, she or he, got it wrong. I hope they're turned off at the moment. Up the ladder of power in our human society march those people who have the least trouble treading on the hands and fingers and faces of other people. And harder to get up there are the reflective, loving, caring, compassionate people. When the Dalai Lama's out of Tibet and the Beijing bosses are running Tibet, a very simple example of how this doesn't work. And here is our challenge. We've got to find a way where the compassionate, loving, caring people get to run things, and the violent and destructive, or at least those who know they're right, can march so easily to the top, which is the prevailing way the world doesn't work at the moment. And it's intriguing to know how that's going to work out. Now, I was at Coffs Harbour High School on the East Coast Monday week ago, because I went there till I was 16, and they inducted me into the Hall of Fame after they got their own little thing for ex-students, and I went along. I'm not one for prizes, but I went along and a bit reticent, and I'm so glad I went there. 900 wonderful young Australians, and they had a dance and a musical thing, and gave me a blazer with, or a jumper with Bob written on the back, and various things. But we had a talk. I had a talk with the environment group afterwards, and two young women in that came right to the matter, as younger folk tend to do. Bob, why aren't you depressed? And why don't you get sad about things? Now, that is a fundamental question for us human beings. And I said to them, well, I spent 10 years there when I was younger, and it wasn't very nice, and I didn't like it. Being gay and Presbyterian was not a good mix back in the 60s, I can tell you. Couldn't talk to anybody about that. Amongst other things, looking at 30,000 nuclear weapons, being in Piccadilly Circus in 1970. Yes, I did see Jimi Hendrix when he was brought in, sadly, on a bier in one autumn day when I was working at St Mary Abbott's Hospital. But 30,000 nuclear weapons and the brightest young minds in Russia and America ready to press a button should they get into conflagration. And as Obama says, this is still the biggest nemesis for humankind. And some people talk about nuclear, let's have nuclear energy, that'll be safe, forget about Japan. And the answer to that is no. I see nuclear and renewables, according to the Sydney Morning Herald last week, are now in cost coming down below coal. But nuclear has this problem. Unlike a solar panel, a handbag-sized nuclear weapon can hold a city to a ransom, and Al-Qaeda is online asking for the technology. And America's thinking about, and Israel's certain it's going to bomb Iran if they get nuclear technology which can lead to that next step. It's an awesomely destructive agent in our midst. The nearest we need a nuclear reactor is 93 million miles away. Sorry about the old mileage. That sun out there. But we have, and I've just been to the Kimberley, bit burnt around the neck and up the arm here. I've got a plimsoll line right there from the sun. And we have the solar resources on the planet to obviate the need for any of the dangerous technologies. And the technology to go with it is developing extremely rapidly. And part of the $10 billion package which Christine Milne and the Greens, when I was there in the Senate, negotiated with the Gillard government. $10 billion for renewable energy, paid for by the polluters. Tony Abbott wants to take $2.5 billion off the taxpayers and give it to the polluters and ask them would they mind fixing up some of the greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. This plan takes money off the big polluters, compensates householders and leaves $10 billion over for renewable energy. I was just talking to a woman on the plane next to me from Broome who comes from Geneva, and she says she can't believe there's so few solar panels here. There's a lot more in Switzerland. And we're the solar country, we're the sunny country. You know, it's part of where we're not going in this country at the moment. But we've got the alternative technology, and I'm very optimistic about that. But to go back to my school sisters, if you like, the girls at Coffs Harbour High School, the answer is it's empirical. We can be optimistic and it feeds on itself, or we can be pessimistic and it feeds on itself. We don't know what's coming down the line. What I do know is that optimism fires people into being active. Pessimism comes out of a certain sense of rage about things that have gone, I'm talking about reactive depression here, things that have gone wrong that you can't handle. And my answer to this is you have to look at what's going on in the world. And if you're young and you don't get depressed, you've missed it. If you don't feel bad about it, if you don't have a question about how do you handle this, you've missed it. It's very daunting indeed. But you have to be able to say, OK, I'm going to take Syria and put it on the shelf. I'm going to, because I can't alter it. When I could, I've rung foreign ministers and made suggestions and so on. But reasonably, you're a student at Murdoch. You can't intervene in Syria. If you are looking at post-genocidal Rwanda, now I'm going there in November to help the Greens establish. You can't yet. I couldn't then. The Greens Party held a conference a year or two ago, and you have to have a conference to set up as a new party in the post-genocide democracy of Rwanda. And people with big sticks came in and bashed them up and broke legs and smashed them, and a couple of weeks later the deputy leader of the Greens was found beheaded in a gutter. So the leader, Frank Habernetzler, and his family have gone to Sweden. And now they're going to hold another conference to try and get registered again. And this time I've said, well, Paul and I'll come over and I'll speak at your conference, because I've met the foreign minister of Rwanda, and they at least won't invade that conference. Or at least if they do, I've got Paul there as a bodyguard. He assures me he'll do his best. But I can do that now. Now, I couldn't do that when I was a student. But what I could do was think about how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. And first thing up here is Emma Goldman's great dictum from the 1890s in Chicago, where she and her fellows were struggling to get women out of sweat houses. And she got to the point where she said to her fellow social revolutionaries, I don't want your revolution if I can't dance. And she was spot on. You've got to have fun. You've got to have companions. You've got to be able to enjoy this planet and human creativity that comes from this planet, and not feel bad about that. And if you want to take a few years to go and do something, or look around somewhere, go. Life's long. And I got grabbed by the lapels by Lieutenant Colonel David Hackworth, who was the most decorated Marine of the Vietnam War, on the stage in Hobart in the late 1980s, and he said, you've got to stop talking about forests. President Reagan's about to be elected for the second time. He's mad and he's going to blow the world up. And I said, I'm paraphrasing, and I said, David, if that's the case, I'm going home to read a book. You know, let it happen. Don't be panicked. Don't be overcome by anxiety. assume, because you have every right to, some things bad will happen. Some things good will happen. You mightn't see them on the front page of the Australian, but they're happening all the time. And if we're going to use our lifetime and space to help the good, then we need to look after ourselves. If you're down on your luck, talk with other people about it. Don't feel shy to look in a mirror and say, hey, I'm not too bad. This is serious and important stuff. My thing is, if you're having a bad time about something, in your mind's eye, imagine it's a neighbour telling you about that over the fence, and take the advice you'd give that neighbour yourself. And take it easy. Presbyterian and gay in big trouble through an illness that was brought on by anxiety that was, I knew from my medical studies, that was potentially fatal. Bought a ticket to London. My good old mum and dad and everybody must have wondered, what is going on with this fella? We thought he was going to be, you know, a Harley Street specialist or something down the line. Well, it was I had thought of suicide at that stage and was contemplating it, and I thought, I can't do that to people, and bought a ticket to London, and there ran into the Alternative Society, sat round with a group of Eritrean students smoking something that didn't affect me a great deal, but made them happy. And I ran into other gay people and other, you know, just a marvellous experience. So, trapped in some position or other, think about your ability to step out of it. But when you do get settled, you find you've got the career you want, and a certificate's all important, although I haven't yet found a university which provides a gold-plated certificate, a diploma for common sense. It's not there. However, get that as best you can, and then proceed to do what you want to. Miranda is up her tree because she wants to be there. That's where her heart is. Her mum came and visited her recently and spent 4 days up there with her. She must have a bit of courage in the DNA, I think, because it would be a terrifying experience for her too, getting up into that tree. Now, I'll just finish by talking about where I've just come from, Broome. We have up there the Woodside proposal for the world's biggest gas factory to be built across the middle of the world's biggest humpback whale nursery. Now, if you, like I, before I read into your West Australian whale experts, thought that whales come from Antarctica, we're wrong. They come from the Kimberley coast. That's where they conceive. They've got a 12-month gestation, and that's where they give birth. And here we have this magnificent stretch of warm water which is home of the whales. And up there on the coastline right now are thousands, probably more than 10,000, in the biggest herd of humpbacks on the planet. The blue whales are even bigger, and what's left of them? Who knows? Maybe 1,000 left. The biggest creatures ever to move on the face of the planet, much bigger than the dinosaurs. Go through even further. Their nursery somewhere in Indonesia, and I shudder to think. But this Kimberley coastline, which the international crew on Sea Shepherd tells me is stunning, and the whale population amazed them, is something else. When I spoke in Perth a month or so ago, having come from Broome, Jeff Hansen from Sea Shepherd came up out of the audience. He lives here in Perth, and said, could Sea Shepherd help somehow? Because I'd heard from the whale people, and we have some magnificent understanders and studiers of whales at this university, that this may be the last birthing season after tens of thousands of years of history in which those whales are free of the threat of modern industrial consumptive human Homo sapiens society. The last one. The decision will be made on this gas factory about this time next year, certainly in the first half of next year. They're expecting that Woodside will take up from Broome today a drill to put into the soil onshore across the Galarabaloo country, and there's people there ready to peacefully slow that down. They're great people. I've been to their camp a number of times, just like us. But they've decided they're simply not going to allow that to happen. This is preliminary works on this mega gas factory. Can I tell you, I flew over from I got the job of, after speaking with Jeff, of being mission leader and they took the Steve Irwin, the ship that goes down to confront the Japanese whale murderers off in our Antarctic whale sanctuary while governments do nothing each summer, had a Jabba Jabba Aboriginal man from up there do a smoking ceremony in Williamstown before they left a month ago. And they've gone right round past Port Moresby and come into this whale sanctuary because they logically wanted to see the origin, the birthplace of these great whales that they have to go down and defend every year in Antarctica. And it's mind testing what's proposed by Woodside, backed by Chevron, BHP Billiton, BP, Shell, now Mitsubishi, but in particular Premier Barnett, who is insisting they put this gas factory right across that land at James Price Point, 60 kilometres north of Broome, because he won't say this, but he wants a mega port there to then export coal, uranium and other things out of a freshly industrialised Kimberley. You know, one of the last magnificent natural realms on the planet where the living culture of we human beings is still at play with the earth from which it came, and the whales are part of that. And I'm not going to go to the dinosaur prints 130 million years old along that coastline, or the bilbies, which I was told this morning are one of the most exciting strongholds after they've been wiped out of the sandy desert in recent years, right there where the gas factory is about to be built. But I did fly over in the Steve Irwin helicopter day before yesterday, and they've got the footprint of this factory laid out on shore, and it's as big as a Perth suburb. The pilot, ex-Vietnam helicopter pilot, said, "Oh Bob, that must be," with his American accent, he's a great guy, whatever, said, "that looks like they've got a housing estate." And I said, "No, that's just the footprint of this factory." It's a $40 billion proposal, and they're going to have a port there which is going to have a pier running 8 kilometres out to sea. We never went that far out on the Steve Irwin. We saw hundreds of whales and mothers nursing their babes in closer to that. Woodside says, no, they're out there. Well, that breakwater is going to bisect that nursery. Don't float up and down the coast anymore. You're going to have a sandstone wall stuck right in the middle of this nursery. They're going to use explosives, of course, to blast the way out for mega gas tankers. The gas is going to be imported from 400 kilometres off the coast in a series of pipelines to the factory, which will then take it back out to this pier, which will then put it aboard super tankers, which will export all of it to the rest of the world with a $200 billion return over the coming years for Woodside and its fellow partners. I'll just say that they need, for these gas tankers from this pier, including this pier, to dredge 20 kilometres out into the ocean, 400 metres wide. And 34 million tonnes of spoil will come from that, which is likely to destroy 300 square kilometres of seagrass upon which dugongs depend and the food system of the ocean depends. And I can say much, much more about this. But it is the unthinkable coming to the indescribably beautiful. And the whales don't know yet, but we do. And just yesterday, I was sitting on a dirigible with the good folk from Sea Shepherd, and within a kilometre of the coastline at James Price Point, where Woodside study found few of the whales go, a mother came up and slid into the water with her baby next to her together, and the baby put its tail up and went down, and then it brought its tail up again and went down. I found that you can recognise very young ones because their dorsal fin is down. They need to do that, or they have that, because they more easily come out of mum's birth canal. And it takes some days for that fin to come up, so you know they're babes. This is a nursery at this place. And as the mother came up again and went down, out came this long, melodious call. Now, I'm not for inventing things. I know that is whale-to-whale communication and expression. But to me, it's a call to us to do better, to not do what we're going to do. And there's only one way. This gas factory can go elsewhere. Surely we can keep the fossil fuels under the ocean. But if it must go somewhere else, it can go down the coast, and Citigroup says that'll be billions of dollars cheaper. But they've been told they must put it at this place. And I was told yesterday that these whales which come up the coast here have lost their feeding, and I'm talking about mothers feeding, babies feeding off mums as they head south, and the weight of the whales is falling because of the interruption of the ability to replenish the babes as they go. But I just say this, my fellow human beings, these are our warm-blooded fellow mammals in the ocean. They came off the land and they've gone into the ocean. And we could float around there and they'll do us no harm. So why should we come with... we know what's happening to the oceans of the world. Why should we come with explosives and 8-kilometre long piers and 20-kilometre long dredging exercises and spoil to wreck that great nursery which can inspire us as human beings forever, however long the earth may be. So I ask, if you can, write to your local MP. Ask them what they are going to do about this whale nursery. Go and see them, state or federal. Melissa Park from Fremantle came up and had the courage to say this shouldn't happen. Thank goodness for her. Rachel Seward is up there now. Ditto. Scott Ludlam feels the same. Christine Milne's up there. We will all come back empowered by that experience. We need to be writing to newspapers, talking to friends. I've got a few, there's a few posters and other things on the table. Take those, go to Sea Shepherd's website, look at Environment's Kimberley, or Save the Kimberley. But the prescription for these whales is the prescription we write for ourselves. I've been inspired to be up there. The whales I've seen in the last couple of days, I will recollect till my last breath. And I want people thousands of years from now to be seeing the same, and whales to be doing the same on this magnificent, beautiful little planet, which is the only one we have in the whole. As Captain Paul Watson, now on the run, because the Japanese want him in jail for intervening on their illegal whaling in Antarctica, says to school kids, have you ever been on a spaceship? And they'll think about that, and he says, well, you're on one now. And the worms and the beetles and the microorganisms are the crew, and the rest of the living ecosystem is the crew, and we are the passengers, and we do them in at our own expense. So we've got to think about that. We are in the most powerful position of people anywhere on the planet, and if we in Australia can't protect that nursery, which is a whale sanctuary, it's a national whale sanctuary, from this destructive gas factory, we're falling well short of our ability to act. I think when 23 million Australians get to see it, they're not going to allow it any more than they would allow the flooding of the Franklin. But we'll see. I'm going to have to leave a bit early today because I'm going to do that program with the project, which will be on tonight. Now, we'll have a good repartee here. Don't turn on at 7 o'clock for my sake, but have a look at the whales. Really, these are West Australians, great creatures, and West Australians can protect them. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We got time?
Up if you've got a question. Yep.
How do you combat the negative campaign concerning the price of the carbon pollution legislation? As one leading politician has said, it's nothing but a big fat tax.
Yeah, well, leading where? Tony Abbott and Barnaby Joyce and co know that they can that fear and threats are great, have a great impact on the populace. I think we've done it pretty well. I saw the opinion poll after July the 1st change from 55% of people being opposed to the carbon levy on polluters dropped suddenly to 30-something%, because people found that their world didn't implode. I think the passage of time is against Mr Abbott here. He won't change that arrangement back. How is he going to even give up the arrangement now whereby lower income households around the country are being compensated more than the added cost overall of this carbon package? So I think getting it through, legislated before July the 1st, having it implemented in July the 1st with an election due next year, will seal its protection. What I wouldn't be too sure about is, for example, the $10 billion that's left over to go to renewable energy. I watched in the Howard years as they took money out of solar research and gave it to the coal industry in a search for clean coal. I mean, I could have given the coal industry a toothbrush and said, scrub it with this. Would have been much cheaper. They're not going to find it. Coal is unclean. Ladies and gentlemen, we get the politicians we vote for. J.K. Galbraith, the great economist, said the politicians almost exactly reflect the public. And let me say this, I'm partisan here, but I'm happy to be countermanded. If you vote Labor, you'll get the gas factory. If you're Melissa Park, exception, extraordinary exception. If you vote Liberal, you'll get the gas factory. If you vote National Party, you'll get the gas factory. If you vote Green, they're opposed to it. It's as simple as that.
Yes?
Dr. Brown, you were saying all the environmentalists talking against the gas factory talk about Woolloomooroo as traditional owners. Now, you did mention that seasheds have got a Jabba Jabba man doing the smoking. Do you recognise the Jabba Jabba as traditional owners there as well?
I recognise that there's claims by both the Woolloomooroo and the Jabba Jabba for the traditional ownership, and I also recognise that there is a component of the Jabba Jabba who I met on Monday who support the gas factory and support the, well, they feel it's been put upon them, but they support the 1.5 billion over 30 years which will flow from that to the people of the Kimberley. But they requested me, and I'll commit to it, not to represent them in anything I say.
But, sorry, just to follow there, the thing that concerns me, and maybe you've got some comment on it, is it seems to me that if you're opposed to the gas hub, you push the Woolloomooroo on it as traditional owners, not you personally, but generally. If you're in favour of it, well, it just strikes me that you've got, it's white people giving legitimacy to one group as opposed to another.
Yes, well,
according to them reflecting political position that's palatable. Is that fair?
well, I haven't done that, and you notice I haven't spoken about the traditional owners and their various claims and that ancestral history there. But the reality is that community is split, and I've listened to both sides. But I'm here to put the side of the great whales. And I know there's been a bit of conjecture about my meeting with the component of the Jabba Jabba people who want that gas factory. Well, I stand on my record. I respect the Indigenous people, and during that meeting, this hasn't come out, I explained how appalled I am as an Australian and ashamed of what's happened to Indigenous Australians. But, you know, there it goes. And I have not yet entered into the wise use movement of America's dictum. I have not yet entered into any environmental campaign where that dictum, which came from the States in the 1980s, didn't come out and express itself. That is, don't argue the environmental case if you're the developer, because you can't win. Go for the jugular of those environmentalists. Get them.
They do go for you.
I wear it as best I can.
One more question.
How do you feel about encouraging students into the political realm if they've got an environmental bent?
Yeah, look, how about getting into politics? Go for it. But take your time. Don't take it on too early, whichever party you like. But this is a representative democracy, and my experience in politics tells me one thing. They are representative. They're not some superclass of extra competent human beings. True. So go for it. Let me say this. We need, and I'm going to be sexist, we need more women in the halls of power, whether it's in businesses or in politics. We need more earnest, sensitive, well thought out men there, as I explained earlier. And you have to be tough, because as you've pointed out in a way, you're going to cop it. But whenever I get a little bit jaded, I just go back and read the history of the suffragettes. I mean, here was the question of the day, which was hardly answerable. How could you possibly run an economy if women got close to the purse strings? And you could quote the Bible to show that that was the case. Now we see that that's nonsense, sexist ravings of people who didn't understand how the world was going 120 years ago. And we'll hear a lot more of that now in this argument about protecting the planet and exploiting it to the full. And at the moment, the protectors are very much in the wake of the exploiters. And that's why we need people who are on the protectors' side, getting into politics, and quickly. If we can't do it here in Australia, we can't expect them to do it in Papua New Guinea or Rwanda. So go for it. And expect disappointments along the way. It comes that way.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Don't think that was working. Thank you, Bob. It has been an honour for MUEnSA to host you at Murdoch University. And to express our gratitude, we'd like to give you a small gift and make you an honorary life member of MUEnSA. Along with the donations from today, MUEnSA will also be making a donation to the Bob Brown Foundation as a vote of thanks. I'd also like to thank the MUEnSA Committee for all the hard work put in to make this event possible and a success. Thanks also to Murdoch University as well as the School of Environmental Science for their support of the event. The Guild has also been amazing. They provided us with a grant to help with catering, which is very much appreciated. Thank you, Beck, and the rest of the Guild. And thank you all for attending this afternoon. Please stay for refreshments, which will be served downstairs in ECL Courtyard. We will be down there in a few moments. We just have a few things to do first. But we'll meet you all out there.